Well, thank you all for joining the webinar. We're going to give it another few minutes, just that we still have a few people joining. So we'll give it another minute or two and then we'll get started. I'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully we'll have a few more folks join as I'm getting things kicked off. But thank you so much for joining the National Coalition for Food and Agricultural Research for today's Latte N Learn webinar featuring USDA's research, education, and economics leaders. National NCFAR is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, consensus-based, and customer-led coalition that brings together food, agriculture, nutrition, conservation, and natural resource stakeholders to serve as a forum and unified voice supporting increased federal investment in USDA's entire REE portfolio. I'm Sarah Ohlhurst, the Chief Science Policy Officer with the American Society for Nutrition, and I serve as co-chair of NCFAR's Research Outreach Committee. I'll be moderating today's webinar, which features Dr. Stephen Kappes, USDA Agricultural Research Service Associate Administrator for the Office of National Programs. The Office of National Programs sets the research direction and develops budgets for the ARS research portfolio, which includes plants, animals, natural resources, human nutrition, insects, and microbial pathogens. The Office of National Programs also includes ARS's International Research Program. Throughout today's webinar, please type any questions that you may have in the chat box, and we will address audience questions at the end of today's webinar. Currently, Dr. Kappes is leading the ARS Big Data initiative and is the ARS lead on standing up the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, or NBAF, in Manhattan, Kansas. He has served as a senior advisor for animal protection and production in the USDA Office of the Chief Scientist, and he's worked with USDA agencies on issues related to animal health and production, herbicide resistance, and biosafety and biocontainment and high and maximum biocontainment laboratories. He currently co-leads the National Science and Technology Council Subcommittee on Health Security Threats and previously co-chaired a U.S. government interagency biosafety task force, the NSTC Subcommittee on Foreign Animal Disease Threats, and jointly initiated with Canada an international agriculture biosafety level 4 zoonotic disease network. Welcome, Dr. Kappes. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I thought we could start today's program by having you share some background information on ARS with our audience for those who might not be familiar with your work and ARS's work.
Good morning, and thank you, Sarah. And it's my pleasure to participate in the NCFAR Latte and Learn session and share with you some of the great research that we're doing in ARS. ARS is the intramural research arm of USDA, and our sister agency, the National Institute in Food and Agriculture, is the extramural funding arm, and we work very closely together. Between the two of us, we're the majority of the U.S. Publicly funded agriculture research. ARS's appropriations is $1.5 billion in the past fiscal year for our research program. So we want to thank the Appropriations Committee. We certainly appreciate all the funding and support that you provide to us. The funding mechanisms between NIFA and ARS are very complementary. In my own research in animal genomics, we work very closely with our university colleagues and international colleagues, and having both the Nifa and the ARS funding was really critical in the many things that we did. And ARS's funding is more long-term, and it allows ARS to do some things that are not very easy to do with the university system. One of those is called the long-term agroecosystem research, and we have 18 sites that go from the field to the watershed to the landscape level, and it's really monitoring the sustainability of agriculture production, looking at different management practices. Another longer term effort is the germplasm conservation program, both in plants and animals, including microbes. And just this morning, I heard about one of the uses of our animal germplasm program. Within the dairy industry, the Holstein industry, within the US, the genetics is only coming from about 38 animals. And that's a really small population size. One of the problems you have with that narrow genetic base is they're more susceptible to problems with fitness traits like animal diseases and reproduction. Well, Penn State did work on the Holstein genetics in the United States and found out that there were only 2 Y chromosomes in all of the US dairy, all of the US Holstein breed. And that means that only 2 bulls contributed to the Y chromosomes in all of our Holstein animals. And that was amazing that it was only 2, and the Y chromosome determines the sex of the animals. So they went back into the germplasm collection and found 2 other Holstein bulls that are not being used today, and they had different Y chromosomes. So they worked with embryo transfer company and a semen company, generated heifers out of those bulls. And the surprising thing is you would think that a bull that was not used many years ago would not be as have the same milk production levels as current genetics. We found out that that's not true, that the heifers out of those 2 bulls actually were superior in milk production traits. So that's the value of having germplasm conservation, is you're storing those genetics. We've got a lot of tools today that we didn't have back then, and we now can pull valuable genetics out of them. Another one is on the plant side, looking at wild relatives. A lot of wild relatives have disease-resistant traits that we don't have in the highly selected traits that we have. So immensely valuable resource, and it is becoming more and more valuable as we learn more about the genomes of these plants and animals. ARS, we've got about 90 labs in about 90 locations in the United States, and about 1/3 of them are located on land-grant universities. And we have great collaboration with those universities. Many times you can't tell if the scientist is from a university or from ARS, and that's exactly the way we want it. We have about 2,000 scientists and postdocs and another 6,000 employees that fill the administrative and technical positions. We organize our research into about 650 different research projects, and we value our very strong relationship with our stakeholders. If you don't work with your stakeholders and identify the challenges that they're dealing with and understand the environment that they're working in, you're not likely to come up with good solutions for them. So that is an extremely important relationship, and we continue to put a lot of effort into that and get input on what their priorities are. We have a very broad research portfolio. It includes plant and animal production, and the germplasm program I already talked about, plant and animal disease. As time goes on, we seem to have more and more diseases, and we really need to use a lot of the new tools to address those diseases. Entomology program, whether it's for plants, animals, urban or veterinary or medical entomology. We do a lot of work with the military on that. We've got a strong human nutrition research program, and our human nutrition program is different than NIH's. They tend to deal with the metabolic diseases. We're looking at how do you keep people healthy? How do you prevent those diseases ever happening? We've got a strong food safety program, and another program we need to highlight is new products and uses. So we take a lot of agriculture products and develop value-added products, and that's extremely beneficial to agriculture in the United States. And one of those products is bioenergy. And then on the natural resources, we've got soil, water, air research, including grasslands and forages, and sustainable ag production at the Altar sites that I talked about in other areas. So what are our priority areas of this? Climate change, whether it's carbon sequestration, greenhouse gases, enhanced efficiency fertilizer. That's a program with EPA. We're going to announce some winners next week with EPA. On the bioenergy, we've got 5 regional biomass research centers that we operate with the Forest Service. And one of the recent accomplishments coming out of the new products and uses is identifying a yeast that will work on all biomass sugars. And this increases the efficiency of producing biofuel. And this is especially important for woody biomass. And we're currently working on a fungus that will increase bioenergy production. And we've got the biotechnology. We really need to use new tools for increasing production and dealing with the resistance traits. And then precision agriculture. They are farms of using a lot of precision agriculture, and we need to continue developing ways to better use that information and developing decision models so they can make good decisions. We've invested in big data and artificial intelligence and machine learning. And one of the things that you need for AI and machine learning is lots of data. And so we're doing our part in USDA and making our data more publicly accessible. We've done a lot, but there's more to do. And then one of the priorities of our administrator, Dr. Shavonda Jacobs-Young, is increasing innovation. So we have challenge projects where the ideas are coming from the administrator, other projects where the ideas are coming from our scientists on bringing different disciplines together. And then we have innovation funds to stimulate innovation. So here, that's a quick overview of some of our priorities.
That's great. Thank you so much. ARS is really doing a lot of fascinating work, and it covers such a wide breadth of topics of importance to our country. I was going to ask if you had any specific goals or areas of focus coming up for our next fiscal year. And we actually had a question from the audience as well that complements that, asking what ARS plans to do in fiscal year 2023 in specific states without ARS facilities.
In states without ARS facilities? We have collaborations with a lot of different universities, including 1890 in minority serving institutions. And some of the areas that we're looking at is a big focus is the climate change, lots of opportunities there. We recently started a lab in Vermont with the University of Vermont on looking at the entire food production system and looking at how does that impact human nutrition, the nutrient compositions in the food, different management practices. And then we only have a few states that we don't have labs in, that we look at the opportunities that are there, and we have collaborations with just about every state.
That's great. I was wondering if you could share more about the development of NBAF, when that facility will be fully operational, and what science and research you expect to come from NBAF in the future.
Certainly, that's a project that I'm working a lot on myself, and it's a replacement facility for the Plum Island Animal Disease Facility. And historically, ARS and APHIS have been co-located and co-operated there. In 2003, Department of Homeland Security took over it. And we knew that it needed to be replaced because it was built in the 1950s, the initial part of it. And so DHS has taken on the tremendous task of building a replacement, and that's being built in Manhattan, Kansas. And after DHS gets done constructing it, they'll turn it back over to USDA. And ARS and APHIS will be owning and operating it, and DHS will also have a research program with us. And that's a $1.25 billion facility. It's really impressive on what we're doing to make sure that we're going to do this work safely, and not only for the community, but also for agriculture in the area. There's some added capabilities to MBAF. The first is a biological development module, which is a pilot manufacturing process. And anybody who does technology transfer recognizes that there's about a 70% failure rate when you transfer the technology to a commercial situation. And that is true in pharmaceuticals and biologicals for health. And so we have this pilot manufacturing facility to help bridge that gap. And we've actually done some of that stuff on Plum Island with our partner company, Zoetis, on a foot and mouth disease vaccine. So that's a very important added capability. And then Plum Island has a high containment space that's called biosafety level 3. And the MBAF will have also a biosafety level 4, maximum containment. So that allows us to work on zoonotic diseases that can also infect humans. And it's really important that we expand our research. In MBAF, we'll continue the mission that we have on Plum Island. ARS does the research in foreign animal diseases, APHIS does the diagnostic and training, and we'll continue that. And it's going to expand both the ARS and the APHIS programs. In addition to the added capabilities, ARS is going to expand into more arthropod-borne diseases, insect vector diseases. We do some of that, but not very much on the foreign animal side. And then the other part is that zoonotic and emerging diseases. So USDA has already taken over some of the functions in the facility, and we're looking to take over operations of it later on this summer, and hope to have everything moved off of Plum Island in the calendar year 2024.
Wonderful. That's coming up soon.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned ARS has a history of protecting our nation's agriculture, farmers, and citizens against the threat of serious animal diseases, as well as other agricultural threats. Could you touch on the current work that takes place in ARS's biological labs and some of ARS's efforts leading to the control of agricultural pests such as Asian giant hornets?
Yeah, certainly. We've got 9 labs that conduct animal disease research. We have MBAF that we already talked about. We have a sister lab, that's the National Center for Animal Health, that once again houses ARS and APHIS, and that's working with domestic diseases. And then we also have the Southeast Poultry Research Laboratory in Athens, Georgia, and that conducts research on poultry. All 3 of those labs have biosafety level 3 containment space. So the only one that's going to have biosafety level 4 is MBAF. And then we're doing work in Pullman, Washington on tick-borne diseases, horse and small ruminant diseases. Kerrville, we're working on cattle tick fever as well as some mosquitoes. And the cattle fever ticks are a really big problem in Texas. In Manhattan, we have another animal health lab that works on arthropod diseases. Up in Nebraska, we're working on bovine and ovine respiratory diseases. Starkville, working on poultry. We also have some work on chronic wasting disease and mad cow disease, spongiform encephalopathy diseases. We need to continue to work on that. We also have veterinary medical nerve and entomology programs. That's for the animal side, then also a similar program for the plant side. And then biological control. This is a really important part of what we use in agriculture in an integrated pest management, trying to decrease the uses of pesticides and herbicides. So we look for the natural enemies of invasive pests and weeds in countries and habitat that's their normal habitat. And a lot of times we'll find viruses, parasites to control some of these things. And we have 4 international labs that do that work, as well as more than 10 labs within the United States. Those international labs are in France, Argentina, Australia, and China. And this is a really important component of our research. We've dealt with red imported fire ants, the one in the Northeast here, brown marmorated stink bugs. We played a role in decreasing the prevalence of those by looking for biological controls and finding some. We've been working on aquatic weeds, giant reed in the Rio Grande. That's a priority for DHS as well as for agriculture. DHS would like to decrease the density of the giant reed because illegal immigrants can hide in there, and it makes it harder to protect the borders. For us, it's with the cattle fever tick. There's a wildlife called nilgai that the ticks will be attached to them, and they come into the United States, and then they'll drop them in our pastures, and our cattle end up picking them up. So if we can decrease the amount of ticks on the nilgai, that would help tremendously, and that decrease in the giant reed would allow us to see those and be able to make sure that we're tracking the cattle tick fever population down there. On the giant Asian hornet, that was one of the things that you do in these biological control labs is you develop lures so you can monitor the presence of some of these invasive species. And so in the state of Washington in 2019, December 2019, they found that they did have the giant Asian hornet. And so we had a postdoc that quickly developed a lure for the hornet. And that lure was used to trap some of those hornets. And then the Washington State of Agriculture, as well as APHIS, attached a radio tracking device. And the first few times it failed. Can you imagine putting a tracking device on a hornet that's only 1.5, 2 inches long? And they then were able to follow some of the hornets back to the nest and then destroy the nests. And they've destroyed a number of those. So one of the critical mission that we have in the agency is helping our regulatory agencies within USDA and others. So great story, a great success story for that postdoc. They had impact right away.
That is a great story. That's fascinating. You had mentioned that NBAF will be working on the transmission of animal diseases to humans. And I was wondering if you could share some of ARS's earlier efforts on coronavirus transmission, as well as a new vaccine for African swine flu.
Certainly. On the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that's a coronavirus, and we've been conducting research on coronavirus in farm animals for quite some time. So fortunately, we had some expertise when the COVID pandemic hit, and we pivoted, and we wanted to see if farm animals could be infected with the virus and be a reservoir to infect humans. And so in our Athens, Georgia lab, we looked at poultry species, which included chicken, turkey, quail, Peking duck, and Chinese geese. And we found out they're not susceptible to infection, which is good news. And then our Ames, Iowa lab that I talked about, we looked at cattle and pigs and also found that they were not susceptible to infection. Unfortunately, we also work in deer, and we found out that deer can be infected and they can transmit it to other deer that were not in contact, which would imply aerosol transmission. And now we've got lots of cases of that being wild deer being found positive for, I shouldn't say lots of cases. I don't want to make it sound as a bigger issue, but we are finding that that they're infected with the SARS-CoV-2. We're working with APHIS on mink. Mink can get infected, and that's really affecting mink farms. And then the Athens, Georgia ARS scientists have developed a cell-based system that allows them to evaluate farm animal species are susceptible to two new variants of the SARS-CoV-2. And that's really going to decrease the time and the cost of doing animal studies. That's a first screening. You'll still have to come back and do the animal studies to verify it. That's really a good example of how we pivoted and focused on something that was really urgent, both for agriculture and for the general population. On the African swine fever, we've been working on developing new vaccines for a number of years, and we've identified, I think we've patented 4 or 5 different vaccine candidates. We have at least 19 different licensing agreements out there. And one of them that is that looks very good is we're collaborating with a Vietnamese company So we've made a tremendous amount of progress on developing a vaccine to something that has been going around the world the last 5+ years, and most recently was identified in the Dominican Republic. So it's right at our doorstep. This is a very serious issue for U.S. pig producers. And in addition to developing vaccines, we have identified a cell line that we can grow the vaccine candidates in. Until just recently, you had to harvest fresh immune cells from pigs to grow these vaccine candidates in. And we knew that that's nothing you could scale up very well. So we had to find a cell line that would grow in tissue culture, and we found one. So now it is possible for some of these pharmaceutical companies to grow up large quantities of these vaccine candidates. And then we've identified another cell line that is going to be a very good diagnostic tool. It's more sensitive in detecting African swine fever than the DNA test that we have, like PCR. So yeah, we've made a tremendous amount of progress on that. Fortunately, that disease has not come to the United States, but certainly could reduce the prevalence of it in other countries.
That's great. Yeah, it's such important work to protect our consumers as well as our farmers and our livestock. Speaking of coronavirus, what efforts did ARS have to do to transition during the pandemic and to automate more?
So, it's pretty easy for us to have meet with our scientists and our local leadership and identify that what should be the new priorities, giving something like the SARS-CoV-2 situation. So that's the advantage that we have in ARS, is we can do that pivot pretty quickly, provided that we've got the facilities and the expertise to do it. And fortunately, we did. One of the challenges we had is, how do you work in given the CDC guidelines on trying to keep our employees and other people safe? And so that was one of the challenges we had, is basically having a smaller amount of workforce in. How can they be separated, wearing masks? And some of these things are a big challenge when you're in containment. So, so it's just that we have to be flexible, but we're set up so we can do that pivot rather quickly. And it was nice that our scientists were able to do all this important work.
That's good. Yeah, I am a registered dietitian, so ARS's nutrition work is of particular importance to me. And I was wondering if you could talk more about ARS's efforts to improve the nutritional composition of the food supply. You had mentioned earlier that you're working in Vermont on some of that work, and how you use Food Data Central to support these efforts.
Yeah, thank you for that question. ARS has a strong human nutrition program. We conduct human research at 6 human nutrition centers, one in Albany, another one in Grand Forks, North Dakota, here in Beltsville, Maryland, children's nutrition research in Houston and in Little Rock. And then we've got the aging human nutrition work at Tufts, which, as I get older, those accomplishments I tend to read more closely because it becomes more important. I've pointed out how our research is different than NIH's, and we're really looking at defining the role of food and components of food in optimizing health throughout the life cycle, as you can see with our human nutrition focus at those different centers. In specific on the Food Data Central, it's really providing a lot of information on nutrient composition. And it's one of the largest databases on nutritional content of food in the world. It contains 5 different types of data. And one of the data, branded foods, includes private food composition data. So it's really important to bring all this data together. We have over 300 information on over 350,000 foods. And the database is heavily utilized by the federal government with over 250 million page views per year. The database is very essential for some of the functions that we do within the U.S. government on different programs and agencies, including FDA, the school lunch program, and development of the dietary guidelines. It is also heavily used by the food industry, the academic researchers, and the general public. And I've got to highlight one of the recent accomplishments that's getting a lot of press time. In Albany, our scientists did research looking at the nutrients benefits of cooked black beans. And they found out that when they fed them to obese mice, it reduced insulin resistance by 85%. It's really important that we look at all the food sources that we have and identify these beneficial impacts that we can have. And this really goes into all of us being able to do a better job of eating healthy and having a higher quality of life, as well as a longer lifespan. So I know this is really important for each and every one of us.
Yes, definitely. I've seen some studies that show the public investment in agricultural research results in large economic benefits. And clearly we're hearing a lot of the benefits from your stories today. I was wondering if you could share more about specific return on investment from ARS research, and as well as some of the outcomes of ARS's pre-competitive research and the ARS's efforts to facilitate technology transfer that leads to innovations, which you touched on earlier.
Certainly. One of the articles that gets referenced often relative to the return on investment in publicly funded agriculture research is a 2018 economic research study. Keith Pugley, along with some of his university collaborators, did a real nice job in showing that the return on investment is 17-to-1. So to put this in context, the $1.5 billion that the appropriations committees provide to us every year, that return on investment every year is about $25 billion. So you can see that's huge. And same is true for NIFA's funding. And we actually did some return on investment research with ERS in 2010, and we involved and evaluated case studies, cattle genetics, human nutrition, water quality, and each one had its own characteristics, but definitely showed a huge return on investment in those. On the technology transfer side of things, we have a very strong tech transfer program, and our default setting with all of our technology and information is, if you can make it publicly available for everybody to use, that's the way we're going to do it. That's the easiest and fastest way to get the information out there. And however, if somebody has to further develop that, then we need to protect it in some way. And we do that through patents, licensing agreements. Some of that work we get started with a cooperative research and development agreement with some of our partners, and that's been very successful. We've got a former deputy director of our technology transfer office, and he would provide for many of us a presentation on the impact of ARS's research for Thanksgiving. And just about everything you eat at Thanksgiving, ARS had an impact on. Just a few of those things is seedless grapes, large-breasted turkeys, coating to prevent browning in cut fruit. We did that with McDonald's. Permanent pressed cotton, flame-resistant pajamas, the cranberries and the blueberries we eat. We've got a genetic improvement that we work with universities. And just during the pandemic, we've been working with a company to develop, and we evaluated the use of cotton in the face masks and the company found out that it had antiviral properties for viruses like the SARS-CoV-2. And I know that they were going to then specifically evaluate SARS-CoV-2. So there's just a lot of those things that just about everything you touch relative to agriculture through the years, we've worked on it. So, and yeah, we try to target, complement what's funded through the universities. And some of the areas that we can have a bigger impact on is pre-competitive research. A lot of people don't know, a lot of farmers don't know it. When they're buying that bag of corn, seed corn or soybeans, how much ARS and the universities have contributed to research. We do pre-competitive research, and then the plant breeding companies then will take that and they'll integrate it into their specific lines. And we've done a great job in transferring technologies. Just last year, the tech transfer group filed for 74 patents. We were awarded on 40 different patents. We filed 172 invention disclosures, and we developed 613 new licensing agreements. And some of those were with the African swine fever vaccine candidates that we talked about. We also have an innovation fund that the Office of Technology Transfer will provide small amounts of fund to ARS scientists to move some of the information and technology to the industry. So it's a system that's working very well.
That's amazing. Yeah, ARS research really is everywhere, it sounds like. What are ARS's ongoing efforts to attract young talent to agricultural research and your efforts to broaden the pipeline of agricultural researchers?
Very important subjects. The agriculture researchers in the United States, we're all getting to be older and older. The average age keeps increasing, and we really need to fill the pipeline. And ARS has a number of programs to develop that next generation of scientists and engineers. We track how many students and postdocs we have in our lab and how many that we engage with. Just the ones that we're training in our lab, we had over 1,000 of those high school, undergraduate, and graduate students in our labs, and we had over 200 postdocs. One of the postdoc programs is an administrator funded postdoc, where she provides funds for 40 different postdocs. And some of the postdocs we target for high priority areas such as big data, AI, and machine learning, and that's been very successful. We also, there's a USDA program called Pathways that we can bring students on board. And then we have specific programs for minorities, such as the Wallace Carver Internship Program, the 1890 Land Grant Institution Scholar Program, and the 1994 Scholar Program, the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. So we know that the only way we're going to be able to continue doing what we're doing for this country is by loading that pipeline. And I know there's going to be, from what we've seen, there's going to be some really good leaders coming out of the people that we're training today. And then also we've got workforce development funds with MBAS. So we're specifically, both APHIS and ARS are training people in the animal health microbiology area.
Great. I wanted to remind our audience to type any questions that you might have into the Q&A box. I'll take a minute to see if we have any questions from the audience. Feel free to share those questions at any time. In the meantime, Dr. Kappes, you've touched on some other agencies, and so I was wondering if you could talk about the collaboration USDA has. You mentioned DHS, APHIS, and I was just wondering if you could talk about what a bigger role collaboration with other agencies you guys play.
Certainly, collaboration is the only way we can be successful, by collaborating. I earlier talked about our relationship with stakeholders, and that part of our mission is serving regulatory agencies. We have to be, the only way you're going to have a good collaboration is if your partners know a lot about you and you know a lot about them. And so we're continually engaging within USDA, NRCS, Food Safety Inspection Service, APHIS already talked about, our relationships with Nifa. We do work with Rural Development, Foreign Ag Service, outside of USDA, FDA, EPA. Basically you have different communities that you work with, and whether you're working with collaborators at universities or international collaborators or with some of these regulatory agencies, it's only when the group comes together and you present all your perspectives, that you're able to come up with a really good strategic plan on how to address their needs.
We'll have one last call for audience questions. I'm not seeing any at this time. Dr. Kappes, do you have any closing words that you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh, first, I'd like to thank all of you taking the time that you have to be part of this call. And, you know, I can't say enough about USDA and ARS. I grew up literally in ARS. I came to the agency before I had a PhD, and I've had a lot of different jobs. And I can truthfully say, and I've said this many times, I could have not found a better agency for me to have my career in. It's fit me like a glove. I grew up in a family farm from South Dakota, and I always wanted to give back to agriculture because I've seen the value to my siblings and many other people, and being able to help feed the world is so important. And through ARS, I've been able to do that.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
A few questions. What can Congress do to be more helpful to ARS and the important research and work that ARS is doing?
I'd say Congress is already very helpful. You know, we've been funded very well, and we have many meetings with the Hill. Matter of fact, last week I have to brief both the Office of Management and Budget and the House Ag and the House and Senate Ag and Homeland Security on the progress of MBAF. And so we have lots of interactions with you, and we know that we've submitted some of these priority areas in the budget, and definitely of hearing positive responses back. So we really appreciate your support, your interest. We get lots of questions about what we're working on, and that's really important because we have to keep you informed. And you know, in some cases, it's keeping you informed so you can keep your constituents informed, and that's extremely important. So don't hesitate to reach out to us and find out on specific things what we're working on, because we all have to communicate what the federal government is doing. So thank you.
Great. And and you know, there's still time if other people have questions that you want to type into the Q&A box, please feel free to do that. But oh, looks like we have another. Dr. Kappes, you'd mentioned climate change research as a top ARS priority. And does this include research on adaptation and resiliency, or will research mainly focus on carbon sequestration and reducing CHG's emissions?
We address adaptation as well as mitigation. So we're looking at everything, the greenhouse gases. You know, a big contributor to that is nitrogen fertilizer and ruminants from dealing with manure, as well as how we can improve soil health and sequester more carbon. How can we generate more bioenergy? So we're looking at all aspects related to agriculture, this is a serious problem that's going to affect all of us and our ability to produce food. And so it's all hands on deck on how we can do this.
Great. Any other audience questions at this time? If not, I will thank you, Dr. Kappes, for again, and thanks to our audience. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today to learn more about USDA's Agricultural Research Service. I, in particular, found everything that you shared very informative, and it's clear to see the important work that you and ARS are doing to lead our nation's agricultural productivity and resiliency. I wanted to remind the audience that today's Latte N Learn is actually the first webinar in an educational webinar series featuring USDA's REE leaders. So please make plans to join us for the second webinar on February 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern for a discussion with Carrie Castile, the director of USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. We'll include a link to NCFAR's new website, ncfar.org, and a registration link for the next webinar in the Q&A box. But I just wanted to thank you all again for your time today. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, and thank you, Dr. Kappes, for sharing this information with us.
You are certainly welcome. And let me know if there's any other questions
Yeah.
in the future.
Yes, and that was my cat. She's a very noisy cat, and she wants to say hello to everyone. Thank you all.